In this video, I'm going to talk about and show you some exercises for the common 2-5-1 jazz progression. It's Paul Tobey here from jazzmental.com, and this is the second video in our playlist. If you don't know the 2-5-1 jazz progression, or you've heard about it and wondered, is there a way that I can use that knowledge to become a better jazz player? That's what this video is all about. I'm not only going to show you the theory behind it, but how to comp successfully by moving the fingers into the right place. And then I'm also going to give you an exercise on how to practice it. We're going to dive in just a moment. Okay, again, we're talking about the 2-5-1 jazz progression. In this particular case, let's deal with major keys. Now, I've put together this piece of music, which you can see, which is an exercise, and at the end of this video, you'll know how to use this exercise to become a better jazz player by understanding 2-5-1 in all keys. Now, why all keys? You may think to yourself, well, I really only want to play in C and G and F. Well, that's not really going to work in jazz because most jazz standards go through many keys. It's extremely rare for a piece of music, especially a jazz standard, to stay in one key for very long. And it literally goes through all keys. In most jazz standards, you're going to find at least an example of all keys. So let's talk about the 2-5-1 progression. If you're not familiar with it, it's essentially the second note of the scale to the fifth note of the scale back to the first note. Now that totally makes sense because it's what we call 5 to 1 to 1 to 1. It's always like 5 to 1 because if you put the D at the top and you go down 5 notes, you get to the fifth and you go down 5 notes, you get to 1. If you kept going with that, you'd get to 5. And so that's what we call cycle of fifths. So 2-5-1, once you learn that, you can pretty much apply that to almost all jazz standards. So how do the chords actually get made? Well, the answer is they come right out of the scale. So if we start on 2 and we play the C major scale starting from 2, it's like this. And that's literally a Dorian mode. Do you really need to know that? Not necessarily. But out of that scale, if you go every third note, you start building the chord. And eventually, you end back at D. Now, there's one note that's not available from that chord, and it's this one, the 13th. So the 13th is not available because it creates a tritone with the third of the chord. It's a very harsh sounding chord. It works for dominant chords because tritones are the most important 3/7 of a dominant chord. But in a minor chord, not so much. So what you have then is the 9 and the 11th available. So instead of playing that in root position, what we try to do with both hands when we're comping, and if you don't know what comping means, it means being able to play behind other players. So if somebody's soloing, you're essentially comping. So what we do is, if you look at what I've prepared for you, we take the 3, 5, 7, and 9 and play that in the right hand. And then we play 1 and 7 in the left. So again, it's important to know that because when you're playing 2-5-1 progressions, you don't want to move very far to get to the next chord, which in this case, if you look at the sheet, is a G13 chord. Why is it a G13? If you build the scale in thirds, you get a G13 chord. Sounds pretty harsh. Why? Because one of those notes is not available. That's the 11th, because it creates a flat 9 with the third. Which is probably the most harshest interval there is. You wouldn't want to play that very often. Now, it does work in some cases where that flat 9 is in there, but it's because it's a specific chord called a flat 9 chord. But in this case, we want just the G with the G chord with the 9 and the 13. And so we space that properly by playing the 7th, 9th, 3rd, and 13th in the right hand, as you can see on the sheet, and only the root in the left hand. So if you look at the first chord, all you have to do is drop one finger from the C to the B, and you get the next chord. And then when we get to the major 7th chord, again, let's build the chord. Why does it sound like that? Again, there is a flat 9 in there with the 11th of the chord. When you're using minor chords and major chords, you never want a flat 9 with the third of the chord. So take that out and leave the 9 and the 13. So the way we do this in the progression is first chord, D minor 9, to G13, which is really just a G7 chord with the 9 and the 13 on top, and then to C major with a 13. So you can see in that progression, the hands didn't move very far. Then when we go into B flat major, which is the next progression, the 2-5-1 in B flat major, all you have to do is go from the C major chord to the C minor chord. And do the same thing over again, just in B flat. Then when you go into A flat major, and you'll notice my hands don't move very far. One more time, in C major. And now we're back at D and start all over again. But that's only half of the keys. The other half of the keys has to start on a different note through cycle of fifths. So in this case, we're starting on F major 7. And that is 2-5-1 comping in all keys. Now, the reason why I've written it like this is because I want you to be able to comp with the drums and play those and beats in front of the beat. So what we're going to do is play along with this simple drum track, and I'll show you what the exercise should sound like. And that's pretty much it for the common 2-5-1 jazz progression. Practice that with the backing track as many times as it takes for you to get it under your fingers and memorized. You don't want to be looking at the sheet all the time. So memorize those progressions. And once you do that, you'll know how to play 2-5-1 in all keys. Once you know that, then you'll be able to move on and do different voicings, but that's for another video later on. In our next video, we're going to discover how to play the proper scales with those chords and comp with the left hand at the same time. This is the beginning of soloing, and I hope you enjoy it. So stick around for that. Thanks for spending a little time with me. It's Paul Tobey. This is a fairly new YouTube channel, and we'd be really grateful if you could give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So we'll be adding about 5 videos a week, just like this one. The videos are mainly focused on technical skills development, recording tips, and even professional and business development for musicians like you who want some help from a professional musician like myself. So I've toured 17 different countries, made 8 albums, was signed to a really good label, and made a full-time living as a professional artist. So I know and I'm confident that I can be a great resource for you. Subscribe now, and I'll see you in another video.